On the morning of March 16, 1858, in Natchez, Mississippi, a plantation overseer named Jacob Thornton woke to find 7 human heads mounted on the whipping post of Blackwood Plantation. His fellow overseers, decapitated, eyes still open in frozen terror, blood pooling in the Mississippi mud. By noon, 200 enslaved people had vanished into the swamps. By sunset, the entire South was trembling. This is the story of Isaiah Johnson, blacksmith, father, and the most feared slave rebellion leader Mississippi ever tried to erase from history. But it all began 6 months earlier, when Isaiah was still forging the chains that bound his own people. Summer of 1857, Natchez, Mississippi, Adams County, the heart of King Cotton's empire. Blackwood Plantation sprawled across 3,000 acres of prime delta land, where cotton grew so thick you could barely see the sky. Master Cornelius Blackwood owned 200 souls, not people. Souls. That's what the ledgers called them. Property valued at $800 per head. Total investment, $160,000, more than most banks held. The plantation operated like a military installation. 7 overseers controlled everything. Each supervised roughly 30 field hands with iron fists and leather whips. The system was perfect, efficient, brutal. At the center of it all stood a blacksmith shop. Small, brick, always hot, always loud with the ring of hammer on anvil. That's where Isaiah lived. Isaiah Johnson was 38 years old the summer everything changed. Born in Angola, stolen at age 12, survived the Middle Passage chained in darkness for 8 weeks, sold in Charleston, resold in New Orleans, finally purchased by Cornelius Blackwood in 1832 for his exceptional skill with metal. Isaiah stood 6 feet 2 inches tall, shoulders broad as an ox yoke from 26 years of swinging a 10-pound hammer, arms like twisted iron cables, hands scarred and calloused from 1,000 burns. His face was weathered, lined deep from decades under the Mississippi sun, but his eyes retained something the others had lost: intelligence, calculation, memory. Isaiah could read, though he never let anyone know. Taught himself by stealing newspapers from the big house trash, memorizing letters by candlelight, comparing words until patterns emerged. He spoke little, observed everything, remembered every slight, every injustice, every casual cruelty. His forge sat 100 yards from the big house, close enough to hear Master Blackwood's dinner parties, but far enough to be forgotten. Isaiah had one skill that made him invaluable. He forged the tools of oppression: shackles, chains, iron collars, ankle cuffs. The instruments that kept 200 people in bondage. Every link he welded was perfect, had to be. Master Blackwood demanded it. A weak chain means lost property, Isaiah, and lost property means you're back under the whip. So Isaiah forged perfection, day after day, year after year, each chain strong enough to hold a man for life. But he remembered every single one. Isaiah had a daughter, a beanie, 19 years old, beautiful as morning light, pregnant with her first child. 7 months along, belly swollen with life, still forced to work the cotton fields from dawn to dusk. The father was Thomas, a field hand, strong and kind. They'd jumped the broom in secret last year, a ceremony witnessed only by fellow slaves under moonlight. A Benny was Isaiah's reason for breathing. After her mother had died of fever 12 years ago, a Benny became his entire world. He taught her in secret to recognize letters, told her stories of Angola, of ancestors who were kings and warriors, gave her something slavery tried to steal: dignity. Every night after the forge cooled, Isaiah would walk to the slave quarters, find a Benny, and place his rough hand on her belly, feel his grandchild kick, dream of a future he knew couldn't exist. "Papa," she'd whisper, "will my baby be born free?" Isaiah would lie. "Yes, daughter, somehow, someday." But he knew the truth. That child would be born into chains, property, valued at $300 once weaned, probably sold by age 8 to pay gambling debts or buy new cotton gin equipment. The cycle was eternal, unbreakable, or so it seemed. The 7 overseers of Blackwood Plantation were legends of cruelty, even in a region famous for brutality. Jacob Thornton was the head overseer, 42 years old, former poor white from Kentucky, who'd clawed his way to this position through sheer viciousness. He stood 5'10", wiry, with cold gray eyes that never blinked during a whipping. Jacob had personally branded 83 slaves with Master Blackwood's initials, CB, burned right into the shoulder with a red-hot iron. His specialty was creative punishment. When a slave ran, Jacob didn't just whip them. He'd cut the tendons behind their knees, crippling them permanently. "Can't run without legs at work," he'd laugh, tobacco juice dripping from his lips. He'd crippled 14 people this way. They still worked, dragging themselves through the fields, warnings to anyone who thought about freedom. Jacob carried a bullwhip, 9 feet long, braided leather with iron tips. He called it mercy because, as he said, "When I use this, death is a mercy I rarely grant." Marcus Doyle was second in command. Irish immigrant, 35, red-bearded, drunk more often than sober. Marcus had come to America with nothing and found purpose in cruelty. He supervised the female field hands and used his position to rape systematically. Master Blackwood knew. Everyone knew. No one cared. Slave women had no protection. Marcus kept a tally in his cabin. 67 women violated over 8 years. He called them his conquests and bragged about them in town on Saturday nights. Samuel Pritchard, 28, was the youngest overseer and the most sadistic. Son of a Mississippi preacher, Samuel quoted Bible verses while whipping people unconscious. "Slaves, obey your earthly masters," from Ephesians 6:5. He'd cite it with every lash. Samuel invented the hot box, a metal container, 3 feet by 3 feet, left in the summer sun. Temperatures inside reached 140 degrees. He'd lock slaves inside for hours as punishment for minor infractions, speaking out of turn, looking at him wrong, working too slowly. 3 people had died in Samuel's hotbox. He called it purification by fire. William Cobb, 39, was the dog handler. He owned 12 bloodhounds, trained specifically to hunt humans. William would describe in graphic detail what his dogs did when they caught runaways. The tearing, the screaming, the blood. He found it entertaining. William had caught 47 runaways over 6 years. Only 31 came back alive. The other 16 were returned in pieces, savaged by dogs, left to bleed out as examples. Thomas Whitaker, 45, was the numbers man. He calculated quotas. Each slave had to pick 200 pounds of cotton per day. Fall short by even 10 pounds, and Thomas would personally deliver 20 lashes. No exceptions, no mercy for sickness, exhaustion, or pregnancy. Thomas kept meticulous records. He'd whipped 1,847 slaves over 9 years, averaged 205 whippings per year. He was proud of his consistency. Robert Hayes, 33, was the trader's liaison. When Master Blackwood needed cash, Robert selected slaves to sell. He specialized in separating families, calculated which sales would cause maximum profit and minimum resistance. He'd sold 89 children away from their mothers, watched them scream and beg, felt nothing. Robert once said, "Negroes don't feel love like we do. It's just animal instinct. They forget in a week." He believed this. Finally, there was Luther Pierce, 50, the oldest and cruelest. Luther had overseen plantations for 30 years. He'd seen it all and felt nothing. When a slave collapsed from exhaustion in the field, Luther would urinate on them to wake them up. If they didn't rise, he'd beat them where they lay. Luther had a collection, ears. He'd cut them off as punishment for listening to abolition talk. 37 ears preserved in jars of alcohol, displayed in his cabin like trophies. He'd show them to new slaves. This is what happens when you listen to the wrong ideas. These were the 7 men who controlled 200 lives with systematic terror, and Isaiah forged the chains that helped them do it. The forge was Isaiah's domain, but also his prison. Every morning at 4:30 a.m., he'd wake in his small cabin in the slave quarters, eat a handful of cornmeal mush, and walk through darkness to the blacksmith shop. By 5:00 a.m., the fire was roaring. By 5:30 a.m., the first commission would arrive, usually Jacob Thornton with demands. "Isaiah needs 6 new pairs of shackles, buying new field hands next week. And that ankle chain for the runner we caught needs to be shortened. Boy keeps trying to slip out." Isaiah would nod. "Yes, sir, Mr. Thornton. Have them ready by noon. No emotion, no reaction. The mask of servitude perfected over 26 years. But inside, Isaiah catalogued everything. The runner's name was Benjamin, age 16. caught trying to reach the Ohio River, brought back with one ear cut off and 100 lashes splitting his back open, now chained in the hot box for a week to break his spirit. Benjamin would die in that box. Isaiah knew it, had seen it before. The heat and dehydration and infection would take him in 5 more days, and Isaiah would forge the chain that held him there. This was his life, creating the instruments of his people's suffering because refusing meant his own death, or worse, Abeni's. Every hammer strike was a compromise with evil. Every perfectly welded link was a betrayal of his soul. Isaiah felt it accumulating like rust on iron, corroding him from the inside. But he had learned to separate mind from action. His hands worked, his mind plotted, his heart waited. On Sundays, the only day of rest, slaves gathered in the quarters for prayer. Christian services, technically, but infused with African traditions Master Blackwood didn't understand. Call and response, ring shouts, spirituals that sounded like worship but carried coded messages. Isaiah rarely attended. He'd lost faith years ago. What God would permit this? What divine plan included generations of torture? But he'd go sometimes to see Abeni, watch her sing with the others. Her voice was beautiful, rich and full of hope he couldn't understand. Wade in the water, children. Wade in the water, God's gonna trouble the water. The song meant, escape through water, break the scent for the bloodhounds. Everyone knew. No one said it aloud. After service, Isaiah would walk with Abeni. These Sunday walks were his only peace. She'd talk about the baby, about names she'd chosen, about hoping for a daughter. If it's a girl, I'll name her Zara. Means princess in Arabic. Mama told me that before she passed. Isaiah would smile, his weathered face softening. Zara Johnson. A princess born in hell but destined for heaven. Abeni would laugh, then grow serious. Papa, do you think abolitionists will win? Do you think slavery will end? Isaiah would consider his words carefully. Even here, alone, walls had ears. I think change comes when good people make it come. Waiting for salvation is fool's hope, but creating it, that requires courage. Abeni understood. Her father had taught her to think, and thinking slaves were dangerous one Sunday in late July 1857. Isaiah noticed something. Abeni moved slower, winced when she walked, held her belly differently. Daughter, are you well? She forced a smile. Just tired, Papa. The work is hard, but I manage. But Isaiah saw the truth. 7 months pregnant and still picking 200 pounds of cotton daily under the Mississippi summer sun. Temperatures hitting 98 degrees, humidity suffocating, no water breaks, no rest, just pick, 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 or face Thomas Whitaker's whip. You need to slow down, rest more. Abeni shook her head. I fall short of quota. Mr. Whitaker whips me. Baby or no baby, he don't care. I seen him whip Martha last week, and she was 9 months. Along. Baby came early that night, born dead. Isaiah felt something crack inside, a small fissure in the dam holding back decades of rage. I'll speak to Master Blackwood. Ask for lighter duties. Abeni grabbed his arm. No, Papa. You know what happens when we ask for anything. They see it as uppity, as challenging authority. They'll make an example. Please, I can manage. Isaiah looked into his daughter's eyes and saw his own helplessness reflected back. He was 6'2", 230 pounds of solid muscle, could bend iron bars with his bare hands, had killed a man once in self-defense back in Angola before being captured, and he was completely, utterly powerless to protect his pregnant daughter from being worked to death. That night, alone in his cabin, Isaiah wept for the first time in 10 years. If you're feeling rage right now, you should. This was real. This is the America textbooks don't teach. Your anger is justified. These horrors happened. August 17, 1857, a Wednesday. Temperature 96 degrees by 10:00 a.m. The cotton fields of Blackwood Plantation stretched endlessly, white bowls ready for picking, row after row disappearing into heat shimmer. 200 slaves worked in synchronized misery, bent backs, bleeding fingers, burlap sacks growing heavier with each handful. The overseers walked the rows, watching, waiting for someone to slow down. Abeni was in row 47, section 3. Thomas, her husband, worked row 46, close enough to see her but forbidden from speaking. The rule was absolute, no talking during work. First violation, 10 lashes. Second, 30. Third, hot box. By noon, Benny had picked 78 pounds. She needed 122 more by 6:00 p.m. to avoid punishment, but the heat was overwhelming. The baby was pressing on her bladder. Her back ached from bending. Her fingers bled from the sharp cotton stems. She slowed down, just a little, just to breathe. Jacob Thornton noticed immediately. He'd been watching her all morning from his horse, Mercury, a massive black stallion he rode. Through the fields like a general surveying troops. Jacob had keen eyes for weakness, and pregnant slaves were always weak. "You there, row 47. Why you moving like molasses?" Benny didn't look up. "I'm working, sir. Just need a moment. Did I ask for your excuses?" Jacob dismounted, bullwhip already uncoiling from his belt. "You fall behind, everyone pays. That's the rule." Thomas, one row over, tensed. Every muscle in his body screamed to intervene, but he knew the cost. Knew that protecting his wife would result in both of them being beaten worse, or sold separately, or killed. So he kept picking. Hated himself for it. Kept picking. Jacob walked up to Benny, boots crunching on the dried earth. "Look at me when I'm talking to you, girl." Benny raised her eyes, 7 months pregnant, exhausted, terrified, but trying to maintain dignity. "Yes, sir, Mr. Thornton. I'll work faster." "Faster?" Jacob laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "You're already behind quota by 15 pounds from yesterday. Thomas Whitaker told me. You think being pregnant gives you special treatment?" "No, sir, I just—" The whip cracked before she could finish, not to strike, just to terrify. The sound echoed across the field. Everyone flinched. Work stopped for a moment, 200 people frozen, waiting to see what would happen. "Don't just," Jacob screamed. "You work or you bleed. Simple as that. Now get back to—" Benny's water broke. A gush of fluid, sudden and uncontrollable, soaking her dress and the ground beneath her feet. She gasped, more from surprise than pain, though the cramping started immediately after. Jacob stared, disgust twisting his face. "You pissing yourself now? You filthy—" Her water broke, an older woman called from 2 rows over. Mama Ruth, the plantation midwife, 67 years old, who delivered 140 babies in her lifetime. "Baby coming. She needs to lie down, needs help. She needs to finish her quota," Jacob roared. "I don't care if she's birthing twins. She picked 78 pounds. And she needs 200. Baby can wait 3 more hours." Benny doubled over as the first real contraction hit. Pain ripped through her abdomen, stealing breath. She fell to her knees, unable to stand. Thomas threw down his sack and ran. Couldn't stop himself. Husband, father, human. He ran to his wife. "Benny, I got you, I got—" Jacob's whip caught Thomas across the face. 9 feet of braided leather with iron tips moving at 60 miles per hour. The impact split Thomas's cheek open from eye to jawline. Blood exploded. He went down hard, hands clutching his ruined face, screaming. No one moves without permission. Jacob stood over Thomas, whip raised for another strike. "You just earned yourself 50 lashes for breaking formation. And she—" He pointed at Benny writhing on the ground. "She gets back to work or joins you under the whip." Mama Ruth stepped forward, old and frail but fearless in that moment. "Mr. Thornton, sir, that baby coming now. She don't work, she don't move, she needs help, or both her and the child die. Master Blackwood lose $1,100 in property value. You want to explain that to him? Economics. The only language that mattered. A healthy slave woman, $800. A healthy baby once weaned, $300. Total $1,100 in master's investment." Jacob hesitated. He'd been reprimanded before for damaging property, but his pride was wounded, and wounded pride in a man like Jacob Thornton was dangerous. "Fine. You got 10 minutes to get her to the quarters. After that, she better be back here, or I'm docking her quota from everyone in her section. You'll all pay." Mama Ruth and 2 other women rushed to Benny, lifting her as gently as possible. She was crying, terrified, contractions coming faster. Thomas tried to stand, face pouring blood, reaching for his wife. "Thomas, no!" Benny screamed. "Stay! Don't make it worse!" But Thomas followed anyway, stumbling blind through tears and blood. Jacob didn't stop him this time, just smiled, because he knew what was coming. Knew Thomas would be punished double for this defiance. Knew the baby would probably die. Premature births in the quarters usually did. Knew this story would spread through the plantation as a warning, and he was right about all of it. Isaiah was in the forge when young Samuel, an 11-year-old boy who ran messages between the big house and the fields, burst through the door. "Mr. Isaiah! Mr. Isaiah! It's a Benny, her water broke in the field. Mama Ruth took her to the quarters. But Mr. Thornton, he whipped Thomas and—" Isaiah dropped the hammer. It hit the ground with a clang that echoed like a gunshot. "Where?" "Quarter cabin 7, Mr. Isaiah." But Mr. Thornton said Isaiah was already moving. He'd never run from the forge before, never left a commission unfinished, never disobeyed the unspoken rule, stay in your place unless called. But his daughter was giving birth 2 months early, after being forced to work in 96-degree heat, and every instinct in his body screamed protection. He ran through the plantation, past the big house where Master Blackwood sat on the porch drinking sweet tea, past the cotton gin, where William Cobb's bloodhounds barked from their kennels, past the whipping post where 3 people currently hung by their wrists, receiving their daily corrections. He didn't see any of it, just ran. Quarter cabin 7 was chaos. Mama Ruth and 4 other women crowded around a Benny who lay on a rough wooden bed, dress hiked up, legs spread, screaming. Thomas sat in the corner, face bandaged with rags, blood seeping through, helpless. Isaiah pushed through. "A Benny! Daughter, I'm here!" Mama Ruth grabbed his arm with surprising strength. "Isaiah, you can't be in here. This women's work. You go outside, pray if you got any prayer left, and wait. How is she?" Mama Ruth's expression told him everything. Baby coming too early. 2 months too early. Ain't gonna make it. And she— The old woman's voice dropped to a whisper. She tearing bad inside. Bleeding too much. "I done this 140 times, Isaiah. I know what I'm seeing. No." Isaiah's voice was stone. "No. Save her. Do whatever you need. I'll get medicine from the big house. Medicine won't fix this. Only prayer now, or miracle." Benny screamed again, arching off the bed. Another contraction, then another. Too close together, her body trying to expel the baby desperately, weeks before it was ready to survive. Isaiah knelt by the bed, taking his daughter's hand. It was so small in his. She looked at him, eyes wide with terror. "Papa! Papa, I'm scared." "I know, Zara, I know." He used her chosen name without thinking. "But you strong, you warrior. You my daughter, the baby. Save the baby, Papa. Save yourself first. Please, daughter, please fight." But Benny's eyes were already glazing. Blood pooled beneath her. Mama Ruth worked frantically, trying to stop the hemorrhaging, but plantation medicine was primitive. Rags and pressure and hope. The baby came at 2:47 p.m. A boy, tiny, no bigger than Isaiah's hand, bluish, not breathing. Mama Ruth tried to stimulate him, slapping his back gently, clearing his airways, breathing into his tiny mouth. Nothing. The baby was dead. Benny felt it. Mothers always know. She wept, a sound so broken it didn't seem human. Thomas crawled to the bed, holding her despite his own agony, both of them drowning in grief. Isaiah stood, walked to the corner, stared at the wall, and something inside him that had been bending for 26 years finally snapped, not dramatically, not with rage or screaming, just snapped. Like a chain welded imperfectly, holding under pressure for years, and then suddenly giving way. Benny died at 3:14 p.m. Bled out. Mama Ruth had done everything humanly possible with no tools, no medicine, no help. But 2 months premature, hemorrhaging, in a cabin with dirt floors, and no doctor within 30 miles, even if a doctor would treat a slave, there was never any chance. Isaiah held her body, felt her grow cold. Thomas held them both, sobbing. Mama Ruth and the other women sang softly, a spiritual about crossing the River Jordan, about finally being free. Isaiah didn't cry. Couldn't. The tears were there but frozen, trapped behind something harder than iron. At 4:00 p.m., Jacob Thornton appeared in the doorway, callous, annoyed. "She dead?" Mama Ruth answered, voice hard. "Yes." "Baby dead." Jacob sighed like he'd heard bad news about the weather. That's $1,100 loss. Master Blackwood gonna be furious. And Thomas, he pointed at the grieving husband, you still owe 50 lashes for breaking formation. And since his wife's quota wasn't met, everyone in Section 3 loses their Sunday privileges for a month. He said this standing over the body of a woman who died because he forced her to work through labor. Said it like it was their fault. Said it and turned to leave. Isaiah stood. Mama Ruth saw his face and grabbed his arm. Isaiah, no, don't. Think of what they'll do. Isaiah pulled away gently, walked toward Jacob. The overseer turned, hand instinctively moving to his whip. Boy, you got something to say? Isaiah looked at him, really looked, memorized every feature, the cold gray eyes, the tobacco-stained teeth, the calluses on his hands from decades of gripping that whip, the scar on his neck from a knife fight in Kentucky 20 years ago. When Isaiah spoke, his voice was quiet, measured, terrifying in its calmness. One day, Mr. Thornton, you're gonna die screaming, and I'm gonna be the last thing you see. Jacob blinked, unsure if he'd heard correctly. Slaves didn't threaten, ever. Doing so meant immediate execution. What did you just say to me? Isaiah didn't repeat it, just held his gaze for 5 more seconds, then turned back to his daughter's body. Jacob should have shot him right there, should have called for backup, dragged Isaiah to the whipping post, made an example that would echo for years. But something in Isaiah's eyes made him hesitate. Something ancient and primal. The look of a man who'd crossed a line from which there was no return. Jacob backed out of the cabin, hand still on his pistol, and walked quickly toward the big house. Inside cabin 7, Isaiah held Abeni's body and made a silent vow. 7 overseers controlled this plantation through terror. 7 men had created the system that killed his daughter. 7 heads would decorate the whipping post, and 200 people would walk free. He didn't know how yet, but he would figure it out. Because Isaiah Johnson had been a blacksmith for 26 years, and blacksmiths know one fundamental truth: everything can be broken if you hit it hard enough, in the right place with the right tool. And he was about to forge the right tools. Pause for a moment. What would you do if you were Isaiah, without rights, without law to protect you, watching your daughter die because a system valued cotton over human life? Leave your answer in the comments. And if you're feeling that this revenge is justified, leave your like. They buried Abeni and her unnamed son at midnight. Slave funerals happened in darkness, unsanctioned and unseen by masters who preferred to ignore the deaths they caused. 30 people gathered in the small cemetery plot beyond the quarters, a patch of ground where 47 other slaves rested. No headstones, just wooden crosses, weathered and crooked. Mama Ruth led the service. No formal prayer. She knew Isaiah had no use for Christian God anymore. Instead, she sang. Others joined. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Thomas stood beside Isaiah, face still bandaged, sobbing uncontrollably. He'd lost his wife and son in one afternoon, lost his reason for surviving. When the last shovel of dirt covered the grave, most people drifted away. Sunday work crews started at 4:00 a.m. Sleep was precious, but 6 people remained. Moses, 45, a field hand who'd become the spiritual leader of the quarters after learning to read from a stolen Bible. Josiah, 32, Master Blackwood's coachman, who knew every road within 100 miles. Ruth, the midwife who'd just closed Abeni's eyes. Benjamin's father, Samuel, 51, whose son had died in the hotbox last week. Martha, 28, who'd lost her baby last month after Thomas Whitaker whipped her. And Thomas, Abeni's husband. They stood in a semicircle around Isaiah, waiting. Moses spoke first. Isaiah, we all seen what happened today. We all know what you said to Thornton. They gonna come for you. Maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow, but they coming. Isaiah nodded slowly. I know. So you got 2 choices. Run north tonight, try for the Ohio River. Or, Moses trailed off. Or, Isaiah's voice was hollow, scraped clean of everything except purpose. Josiah stepped forward. Or we fight. Not just you, all of us. Been talking in secret for months now, wondering when someone would be brave enough to start something. Might be you the one. Isaiah looked at each of them. 6 people, 6 souls ground down by years of torture, 6 pairs of eyes that held the same expression he'd seen in his own reflection tonight. Nothing left to lose. You know what fighting means, Isaiah said quietly. We fight and lose. They don't just kill us. They torture us, make examples, burn us slow, cut pieces off, make our deaths last days. Martha spoke, voice steady despite tears. They already killing us slow, Isaiah. My baby came early like yours 'cause I was beaten, died in my arms. I got nothing left. Rather die fighting than live like this. Samuel nodded. They put my boy in that hot box for trying to run, cooked him alive over 3 days. I heard him screaming and couldn't do nothing. I'm 51 years old. I'll die soon anyway. Rather die taking one of them with me. Thomas, face bandaged and bleeding, said nothing, just held out his hand. The message was clear. I'm in. All the way. Isaiah felt something stirring in the darkness. Hope? No, too fragile. This was something harder. This was rage crystallizing into purpose. If we do this, Isaiah said, we don't half do it. We don't wound them. We don't scare them. We erase them. All 7 overseers in one night. And then we run, all 200 of us, into the swamps where dogs can't track, and we never come back. Silence. The weight of what he'd just proposed settling over them. Moses finally nodded. I'm 45, been a slave since birth, never known freedom. But I heard about it. Heard abolitionists up north talking about how every man deserves it. I want to die free, even if I'm only free for 1 day. I'm in, Josiah said. I know every back road, every river crossing, every safe house between here and Memphis. I can get us out. I'm in, Ruth said. I'm 67. Ain't got much time left anyway. But I can make poisons. Know every toxic plant in Mississippi. Give me 2 weeks, I can brew something, put a man down in minutes. One by one they committed. 6 became 7. The core of a rebellion. Isaiah looked at the grave where his daughter lay, spoke directly to the earth covering her. Benny, I failed to protect you in life, but I swear on your grave, on your son's memory, on the blood of our ancestors, 7 men will die for what they did, and 200 souls will walk free. This I promise. The words hung in the night air like an oath to ancient gods. Then Isaiah turned to the others. We meet tomorrow night. Old Oak Tree past the Cotton Gin, midnight. Tell no one else yet. We plan first, then we recruit. This has to be perfect. They dispersed like shadows, returning to their cabins separately, 5-minute intervals between each. Isaiah walked alone back to his quarters, didn't sleep, sat on his bed staring at the wall until dawn broke. When the 4:30 a.m. bell rang for work, Isaiah Johnson, blacksmith, father, widower, rebel, walked to his forge and began designing weapons. 3 months. That's how long Isaiah planned. September, October, November of 1857. 12 weeks of meticulous preparation, of secret meetings under moonlight, of forging weapons disguised as farm tools. The first weapon he created was simple, a splitting axe. 10-pound head, carbon steel, sharpened to razor edge. Nothing unusual about a splitting axe on a plantation. Wood needed chopping, fires needed feeding, but Isaiah forged 7 of them. Each one slightly different, balanced for different types of strikes, and each one hidden in a different location across the plantation grounds. One buried near the cotton gin, one hidden in the hayloft of the barn, one submerged in the creek tied to a rock, one in the smokehouse, behind the hanging pork, one in the cemetery beneath Benny's grave marker, one in the slave quarters, under Moses's floorboards, one kept in the forge itself, hanging in plain sight. While he worked, he studied the overseers, not obviously, never staring, but tracking their movements like a hunter tracking prey. Jacob Thornton's routine was rigid. 5 a.m., wake, dress, coffee on his cabin porch. 5:30 a.m., morning inspection of slave quarters. 6:00 a.m., ride Mercury through the cotton fields, checking night watch. 7:00 a.m., 6 p.m., field supervision, rotating between sections. 7:00 p.m., supper at the big house with Master Blackwood. 9:00 p.m., drinks with the other overseers at the overseer barracks. 11:00 p.m., return to personal cabin, alone midnight. Sleep, the pattern never varied. Jacob was a creature of habit, and habits were exploitable. Marcus Doyle, the rapist, was more erratic. Mornings, supervised female work crews. Afternoons, disappeared frequently, taking women to inspect remote areas. Evenings, drank heavily at the overseer barracks. Nights, sometimes returned to barracks, sometimes dragged a woman to his cabin. Vulnerabilities. Drunk by 8:00 p.m. every night, often alone with victims in isolated areas. Samuel Pritchard, the preacher's son with the hot box, 5 a.m. Morning prayers, alone in his cabin, 6 a.m. Noon, supervised punishment detail, noon to 0 p.m. Midday rest in his cabin, 20:00 p.m. 7 p.m. Afternoon supervision, 7 p.m. Supper, 8:00 p.m. Bible reading in his cabin, alone, door unlocked, 10 p.m. Sleep. Samuel's piety was his weakness. He believed God protected the righteous, never locked his door, never expected danger. William Cobb, the dog handler, lived at the kennels, 200 yards from main buildings, slept surrounded by his 12 bloodhounds fed dogs. At 6:00 a.m. and 6:00 p.m., otherwise patrolled with 2 to 3 dogs. Constantly vulnerabilities. The dogs were loyal to him, but Isaiah had been feeding them scraps for weeks, building familiarity, trust. Thomas Whitaker, the quota enforcer, office in the Cotton Gin building, worked alone weighing cotton sacks from 7:00 a.m. 8 p.m., ate lunch alone at his desk, walked the same path from gin to barracks every night at 8:15 p.m. No variation, ever. Robert Hayes, family separator, lived in the slave traders' quarters when in town, only present on plantation 1 week per month. Current schedule, would arrive November 14th for monthly auction during visits. Stayed in guest house, 50 yards from big house. Vulnerabilities. Didn't know the plantation layout well. Overconfident. Luther Pierce, the ear collector, oldest overseer, most paranoid, slept with loaded rifle beside bed. Cabin had one door, barred from inside, 2 windows, shuttered and locked. But Luther had a routine. Every night at 9:30 p.m., he'd go to the outhouse 100 yards from his cabin in the dark alone. For exactly 10 minutes, Isaiah catalogued everything in his mind. He couldn't write it down, too risky if discovered, but his memory was perfect, trained from years of memorizing measurements and specifications. At the midnight meetings under the oak tree, Isaiah's core group grew. 6 became 8, then 10, then 15. Not everyone who knew could participate in the killing. Many were too old, too young, too afraid, but they could help in other ways. Mama Ruth gathered poisons, oleander from the big house gardens. She collected at night, 1 leaf at a time so no one noticed. Foxglove from the forest. Jimson weed seeds from the creek bank. She dried them in her cabin, ground them into powder, stored them in small vials carved from hollow reeds. "This here," she'd whisper at meetings, holding up a vial, "is oleander. 4 drops in whiskey, and a man's heart stops in 20 minutes. Looks like natural death. But we ain't using this for mercy. This is for backup if the blades fail." Josiah, the coachman, mapped escape routes. He'd been driving Master Blackwood to Natchez, to Memphis, to New Orleans for years, knew every road, every ford, every swamp passage. "When we run," he explained, drawing in the dirt with a stick, "we don't go north right away. Too obvious. We go west first, into the great dismal swamp, 30,000 acres of hell where dogs lose scent, where white men get lost and die. Maroons been living there for decades. We join them, build strength, then move north when it's safe." Moses recruited, carefully, 1 person at a time, feeling them out, testing loyalty. By late November, 40 people knew about the plan, 40 out of 200. The others would be told on the night itself, too risky before then. Benjamin's father, Samuel, despite being 51 and weakened from years of field work, volunteered for the front line. "My boy died screaming. I want Pritchard, the one with the hot box. That's mine." Martha wanted Marcus Doyle, the rapist who'd violated her 3 times. "I want to watch him bleed. Need to." Thomas, still grieving a Benny, wanted Jacob Thornton. "He killed my wife, my son. I should be the one." But Isaiah shook his head. "Thornton is mine. He dies by my hand. No one else's." The group understood. This was Isaiah's right, his daughter, his vengeance. They assigned targets: Jacob Thornton, Isaiah Marcus Doyle, Martha with backup from 2 men, Samuel Pritchard, Samuel, Benjamin's father, William Cobb, Josiah, who knew how to handle the dogs, Thomas Whitaker, Moses, Robert Hayes, Thomas, Benny's husband, Luther Pierce, Ruth poison, since he was too paranoid. For physical attacks, 7 targets, 7 assassins, 1 night. The date was set, March 15, 1858. 3 reasons, new moon, darkest night of the month. Robert Hayes would be visiting for monthly auction, all 7 targets present. Spring planting started March 16th. The plantation would be chaos with new field assignments, perfect cover for disappearing into the swamps. Isaiah spent November and December forging the tools of revolution, not just axes, everything they'd need. Machetes, 20 of them, disguised as cane-cutting tools, each one sharpened to surgical precision, tested on pig carcasses stolen from the smokehouse. One strike could sever a neck completely. Chains, but not for enslaving, for binding. He forged 30 feet of chain with locks, keys hidden in multiple locations. They'd need to restrain anyone who discovered them mid-operation. Hooks, cotton hooks, standard farming equipment. But Isaiah modified them, sharpened the inner curve to razor edge, weighted the handles, tested them on tree branches. They could punch through 2 inches of hardwood. Files, hidden in the blacksmith shop. When the time came, they'd file through the chains holding the most dangerous prisoners, the ones locked in punishment cells who'd be eager to help. And one special weapon, Isaiah's masterpiece, a war axe, traditional African design from memories passed down through his family. Double-bladed, perfectly balanced, handle wrapped in leather from his own work boots. He called it Zara's Justice. This axe would take Jacob Thornton's head. While Isaiah forged weapons, Mama Ruth prepared medicines. Not poisons now, but healing supplies for after. Because this wasn't a suicide mission. This was a revolution, and revolutions needed survivors. She stockpiled spiderweb for clotting wounds, yarrow antiseptic, willow bark, pain relief, honey, infection prevention, clean rags, bandages, needles and thread, stitching, all hidden in a false bottom of her medicine chest. Josiah prepared. Supplies for the escape, dried meat, stolen from smokehouse 1 piece at a time, over months, cornmeal, skimmed from rations, canteens, made from gourds rope, hemp, stolen from the cotton gin, flint and steel, from the blacksmith shop, blankets, 1 per family, hidden in the cemetery. Moses prepared people spiritually. In Sunday services, he'd preach about Moses leading the Israelites out of Egypt, about Jericho's walls falling, about David slaying Goliath. Every sermon was coded. Every spiritual was instruction. Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt land. Tell old Pharaoh, let my people go. Let my people go. Everyone understood. March 15th, the night Pharaoh died. January and February passed in agonizing slowness. Every day, Isaiah woke expecting discovery, expected someone to crack under pressure, to tell an overseer, to trade information for favor. But no one did, because every person in the plot had lost someone, had been violated, had been broken and rebuilt into something harder than the chains that held them. In early February, there was a close call. Luther Pierce noticed one of the hidden axes, the one in the smokehouse. He was inspecting meat supplies when he saw it behind the hanging pork. "What's this doing here?" he called to the smokehouse attendant, a 60-year-old man named Joseph. Joseph's heart stopped. If Luther examined it closely, he'd see the edge was far too sharp for wood cutting, would realize it was a weapon. But Joseph was quick. "Oh, that old thing? Been there for years, Mr. Pierce. We use it to split the hog bones when we butcher, easier than a saw." Luther picked it up, felt the weight, the balance. His eyes narrowed. Joseph held his breath. Then Luther tossed it back. "Keep your tools organized. This place is a mess." "Yes, sir, Mr. Pierce. Right away, sir." When Luther left, Joseph had to sit down. His hands shook for an hour. That night they moved the axe, reburied it near the cotton gin, too risky leaving it where Luther could find it. Again, by early March, tension was unbearable, 40 people carrying a secret that would get them all killed if exposed. Walking, working, existing under the gaze of 7 men they were planning to execute. Isaiah barely slept. Every night he'd sit in his cabin staring at the wall, running through the plan step by step, looking for flaws. The plan was this, Phase 1. Midnight to 12:30 a.m., 7 teams move simultaneously to 7 locations. Kill all 7 overseers within 30 minutes. Phase 2, 12:30 a.m. to 10:00 a.m. Teams rendezvous at the whipping post. Collect heads. Mount them as message. Phase 3, 1 a.m. to 2:00 a.m. Wake the plantation. Free everyone. Distribute weapons. Burn the big house with Master Blackwood inside. Phase 4, 2 a.m. to dawn. March to Great Dismal Swamp. 200 people 30 miles through darkness. Phase 5, after, survive. Build Freedom Land. Live free or die trying. It was audacious, insane, impossible. It was also their only chance. March 10th. 5 days until execution. Isaiah made final preparations, sharpened every blade one last time, tested every handle, memorized every detail. March 11th, 4 days. Mama Ruth distributed poison vials as backup. Only use if your target gets away. Only use if you have no choice. March 12th, 3 days. Josiah finalized the escape route. We move fast, stay together, no one left behind. We all free or none of us free. March 13th, 2 days. Moses led a final Sunday service. The spiritual that day was steal away to Jesus. Everyone knew what it meant. Steal away, steal away, steal away to Jesus. Steal away home. I ain't got long to stay here. 200 voices sang. 7 overseers heard it as Christian worship. Never understood it was a battle hymn. March 14th. 1 day. Isaiah visited Abeni's grave, knelt in the dirt, spoke to her spirit. Tomorrow, daughter. Tomorrow I keep my promise. 7 devils die. 200 souls walk free. And your name becomes legend. I love you. Wait for me on the other side. But not yet. I got work to do first. He placed a white stone on her grave. African tradition. A marker that someone had visited. Then he stood, walked back to his cabin, and prepared for war. March 15th, 1858. Dawned clear and warm. Temperature climbed to 78 degrees by noon. Perfect weather for the last day of many men's lives. Isaiah worked the forge as usual, hammering, welding, giving no indication that tonight everything would burn. Jacob Thornton rode by on Mercury around 10:00 a.m. Isaiah, need 2 new chains for the punishment cells. We're getting 5 new field hands tomorrow, and some might be troublemakers. Isaiah nodded. Yes, sir, Mr. Thornton, be ready by evening. Good. And Isaiah? Jacob leaned down from his horse, voice dropping. I never forgot what you said that day, in the cabin, when your girl died, about me dying screaming. I let it slide because you were grieving. But if you ever speak to me like that again, I'll nail your tongue to the whipping post. We clear? Isaiah looked up at him, met his eyes, held his gaze. Crystal clear, Mr. Thornton. Jacob smirked, rode away, never realized those were the last words they'd ever exchange. At 6:00 p.m., work ended. Slaves returned to quarters, ate their rations, pretended everything was normal. At 8:00 p.m., most went to sleep. They'd need to wake at 4:30 a.m. tomorrow, but 40 people stayed awake, waiting. At 10:00 p.m., Isaiah retrieved Zara's justice from its hiding place, felt the weight, perfect. He wrapped the blade in cloth, tucked it under his shirt, and walked into the night. At 11:00 p.m., the 7 teams assembled at their designated positions. Isaiah crouched in the shadows near Jacob Thornton's cabin, axe in hand, heart steady. Martha waited behind the outhouse near Marcus Doyle's cabin, machete hidden under her skirt. Samuel positioned himself outside Samuel Pritchard's cabin, hook in his belt, covered by a jacket. Josiah approached the kennels with a bag of poisoned meat for the bloodhounds. Moses hid in the cotton gin, waiting for Thomas Whitaker to finish his evening paperwork. Thomas crouched in the bushes outside the guest house, where Robert Hayes slept, and Mama Ruth stood in the overseer barracks common room with a bottle of whiskey, accidentally laced with oleander, offering Luther Pierce a nightcap. At 11:30 p.m., Moses whistled once, a bird call. The signal. Begin. The night of justice had arrived. We're reaching the most intense moment of this true story. If you're feeling the tension, if your heart is racing imagining what's about to happen, leave your like. And remember, this really happened. These people existed. This vengeance was real. Isaiah's position was perfect. 20 feet from Jacob Thornton's cabin door, hidden behind a tool shed, completely invisible in the moonless dark. He'd been crouching here for 45 minutes, muscles screaming, but he didn't move, didn't breathe heavy, didn't exist. Jacob's cabin showed lamplight through the window, The overseer was inside, finishing his nightly bourbon. Isaiah had watched this routine for 3 months, knew Jacob would emerge at exactly 11:47 p.m. to urinate off his porch before bed. 11:44 p.m. Isaiah unwrapped Zara's justice, felt the handle smooth in his calloused palm, tested the weight one final time. 7 pounds of perfectly balanced death, 11:46 p.m. His heart rate had slowed, not from fear, from focus. He was no longer Isaiah Johnson, enslaved blacksmith. He was something older, something primal. A warrior whose ancestors had fought lions in Angola. A father whose child's blood demanded payment. 11:47 p.m. The cabin door opened. Jacob Thornton stepped onto his porch, bourbon glass still in hand, suspenders hanging loose over his shirt. He set the glass on the railing and began to unbutton his pants. Isaiah moved, silent, fast, covering 20 feet in 3 seconds. Jacob heard nothing until the footsteps were right behind him. He started to turn. Who? Zara's justice swung, in a perfect, horizontal arc. The blade struck Jacob Thornton's neck just below the jawline, with a sound like an axe hitting wet wood. The force of the blow, delivered by a man who'd swung a hammer for 26 years, was devastating. The blade cut through skin, muscle, cartilage, and spine in one clean stroke. Jacob Thornton's head separated from his body. It happened so fast, his brain didn't have time to register death. His eyes blinked once in confusion as his head flew through the air, trailing blood in an arc that caught the lamplight. It landed in the dirt 6 feet away, bounced twice, and rolled to a stop facing his own decapitated body. The body stood for 3 full seconds, arterial spray fountaining from the neck stump, hands jerking uselessly, then collapsed backward off the porch. Isaiah watched it fall. Felt nothing, no horror, no guilt, no satisfaction yet. That would come when all 7 were dead. He knelt beside the head. Jacob's eyes were still open, frozen in surprise. Isaiah picked it up by the hair. Blood dripped, warm, thick. "Told you I'd be the last thing you saw," Isaiah whispered to the dead man. He placed the head carefully in a burlap sack he'd brought for this purpose, then dragged the body behind the cabin where it wouldn't be immediately visible. Wiped the blood from his axe on Jacob's shirt. 1 down, 6 to go. Isaiah moved toward the next position. He needed to help Martha. She was strong, but Marcus Doyle was larger and wouldn't go down easy. Martha had been waiting behind the outhouse for 20 minutes when Marcus Doyle stumbled out of the overseer barracks, drunk as usual. She could smell the whiskey from 10 feet away. Marcus weaved toward the outhouse, fumbling with his belt. He was singing something vulgar, off-key, about a woman in New Orleans. His rifle was back in the barracks. He never brought it to the outhouse. Fatal mistake. Martha gripped her machete tighter. This man had raped her 3 times, once in the cotton field, when she was alone at the end of a row, once in the smokehouse when she'd been sent to fetch meat, once in his cabin when he'd summoned her to clean, then locked the door. Each time she'd been powerless. Each time she'd had to pretend it didn't happen. Had to keep working, keep living, keep smiling when he passed. No more. Marcus entered the outhouse. Martha heard him unbuttoning, heard the stream of urine hitting the pit, heard him sigh in relief. She moved to the door, quiet as death, raised the machete, waited. Marcus finished, buttoned his pants, opened the door. Martha swung. The machete caught him across the face. Not a perfect strike. She'd been aiming for the neck, but nerves made her swing high. The blade split his face from forehead to chin, cleaving through his nose, his right eye socket, his cheekbone. Marcus screamed, high-pitched, terrified. Blood exploded from the wound. He stumbled backward into the outhouse, hands clutching his ruined face. Martha followed him in. No hesitation now. The first blow had broken something inside her, shattered the last chains of fear. She swung again. This time the machete hit his neck. Not clean, the blade stuck in his spine. Marcus gurgled, blood pouring from his mouth. He tried to grab her, but his strength was fading fast. Martha put her foot on his chest, yanked the machete free with both hands, and swung a 3rd time. The head came off. Marcus Doyle collapsed into the outhouse pit, body twitching, blood pooling. His head rolled against the wall, that one remaining eye staring at nothing. Martha stood over him, breathing hard, machete dripping. Her hands shook now, adrenaline flooding her system. She'd done it, killed a man. The man who'd destroyed her. She felt Free. No remorse, no guilt. Just the overwhelming sensation of a weight lifting. A debt paid. 2 men appeared at the outhouse door, her backup team. They stared at the carnage, then at Martha covered in blood. "Jesus Christ," one whispered. "Help me," Martha said calmly. "Need to get his head to the post." They wrapped Marcus's head in cloth, left his body in the outhouse pit, and moved toward the rendezvous point. 2 down. Samuel, Benjamin's father, approached Samuel Pritchard's cabin with his heart hammering. He was 51 years old, arthritic, half-blind in his left eye, not a warrior, but he'd watched his son die screaming in a metal box. Watched for 3 days as Benjamin cooked alive in the Mississippi sun, calling for water, for mercy, for death. Tonight, Samuel Pritchard would know that same agony. The cabin door was unlocked, just as Isaiah had promised. Pritchard's faith made him careless. He believed God protected the righteous. God wasn't home tonight. Samuel entered silently. The cabin was small. 1 room, a bed, a desk, shelves of books. Samuel Pritchard lay sleeping, Bible on his chest, lamplight still burning low. Samuel stood over him. Cotton hook in hand, 3-foot handle, iron hook sharpened to razor edge. He raised the hook high, then drove it down with every ounce of strength in his aging body. The hook punched through Samuel Pritchard's chest, through the Bible, through sternum, through lung, pinning him to the bed. Pritchard's eyes snapped open. He tried to scream, but the punctured lung only produced a wet gurgle. Blood filled his mouth. Samuel leaned close. "My boy's name was Benjamin. You put him in that hot box, cooked him alive. You hear him screaming now from hell, that's you tomorrow." He twisted the hook. Pritchard's body arched, convulsing. Samuel twisted again, and again. Methodical, remorseless. It took Samuel Pritchard 4 minutes to die, drowning in his own blood, pinned to his bed like an insect in a collection. When it was finally over, Samuel pulled the hook free with difficulty. It had lodged in the wooden bed frame. He was exhausted, gasping, but satisfied. He didn't take Pritchard's head, didn't have the strength to sever it. But he'd fulfilled his mission. The overseer was dead. 3 down. Josiah approached the kennels with calculated confidence. He'd been feeding William Cobb's bloodhounds scraps for 3 months. The dogs knew him, trusted him, but tonight, those scraps were poisoned. The kennels were 12 separate pens arranged in a semicircle. Each held 1 bloodhound. Massive animals, 90 pounds each, bred specifically for tracking humans. They'd caught 47 runaway slaves over the years, torn 16 of them to pieces. Tonight, they'd hunt their last. Josiah carried a bag of meat chunks soaked in oleander extract. Mama Ruth had assured him, 4 ounces per dog, death in 10 minutes, relatively painless. He approached the first pen. The dog, Brutus, recognized him immediately. Tail wagged. Josiah tossed meat through the bars. Brutus devoured it. Second pen, third, fourth. Within 5 minutes, all 12 dogs had eaten. Josiah waited behind a tree, watching. The poison worked fast. At 7 minutes, the first dog collapsed, foaming at the mouth. By 8 minutes, 6 were down. By 10 minutes, all 12 were dead or dying. The kennels were silent. Josiah moved toward William Cobb's cabin, which adjoined the kennels. The dog handler would have heard nothing. The poison caused paralysis before death. No barking, no sounds. Cobb's cabin door was locked, but the window was open for ventilation. Josiah climbed through silently. Inside, William Cobb slept, snoring, dreaming of whatever monsters dream. Josiah stood over him, considering. He'd brought a knife, could slit the man's throat, quick, easy. But then he remembered the descriptions, the graphic stories Cobb told about what his dogs did to captured slaves, the laughter, the entertainment he found in human suffering. Josiah decided against quick. He grabbed Cobb's hair, yanked his head back, and pressed the knife against his throat, but didn't cut deep, just enough to wake him with pain. Cobb's eyes flew open. "What?" "Your dogs are dead," Josiah said calmly. "All 12, poisoned. And now, you." He didn't kill Cobb with the knife. Instead, he forced oleander extract down his throat, made him swallow the same poison that killed his dogs, made him understand what was happening. Then Josiah sat in a chair and watched William Cobb die. It took 12 minutes. Cobb convulsed, vomited, gasped for air, clawed at his throat. eyes rolling back, foam pouring from his mouth. Josiah watched every second, didn't look away, didn't feel pity. When it was finally over, he collected Cobb's head with the knife. Messy, required sawing, but he managed, 4 down. Moses waited in the cotton gin building, hidden behind machinery. Thomas Whitaker worked late every night, weighing the day's harvest, recording numbers in his ledgers. Tonight would be his last accounting. At 11:52 p.m., Whitaker stood to leave, blew out his lamp, prepared to walk the path he walked every night to the barracks. Moses stepped from the shadows. "Mr. Whitaker." Thomas Whitaker spun, startled. "Who's there? Identify yourself." Moses emerged into the faint moonlight filtering through the windows. "It's Moses, sir, from Section 5. What the hell are you doing here? Slaves aren't allowed in the gin after hours. You know the punishment for—" "I know all the punishments, Mr. Whitaker. I got the scars to prove it. 147 whippings from you personally over 9 years. I counted every one." Whitaker's hand moved toward his pistol. "You threatening me, boy?" Moses moved faster. He'd been a field hand for 30 years, body hardened by labor. He closed the distance in 2 strides and drove a sharpened cotton hook into Whitaker's stomach. The overseer gasped, bent double. Moses twisted the hook, then ripped it upward. Whitaker's intestines spilled onto the floor in a wet coil. "That's for my daughter," Moses said quietly. "You whipped her when she was pregnant. Baby came early, died. She died 3 days later from infection." Whitaker collapsed, trying desperately to push his insides back into his body. Failing. Screaming. Moses knelt beside him. "You kept such good records, Mr. Whitaker. Every whipping, every pound short, every punishment. You was real organized about our suffering. Hope you kept good records for hell, too." He stood, raised the hook one final time, and brought it down on Whitaker's neck. Took 3 strikes, but the head eventually separated. 5 down. Thomas, a Benny's husband, had the hardest target. Robert Hayes, the slave trader, was a professional, paranoid, slept with a pistol under his pillow and a knife on his nightstand. But Thomas had advantage. Grief channeled into focus. He'd lost his wife and son, had nothing left to lose. The guest house was small, single-story, 1 bedroom. Thomas had memorized the layout during the day when he'd been assigned to clean it. A convenient coincidence Moses had arranged. He entered through the kitchen window, silent, barefoot, moved through the dark house like a ghost until he reached the bedroom door. Robert Hayes slept lightly. The moment the door creaked, his eyes opened. His hand moved toward the pistol. Thomas threw his knife. Not perfect aim, he wasn't trained, but luck favored him. The blade buried itself in Hayes's shoulder, pinning his gun arm to the bed. Hayes screamed. Thomas rushed forward, tackling him before he could grab the knife with his other hand. They struggled. Hayes was trained, dangerous, even wounded. He managed to roll on top of Thomas, free hand reaching for the knife in his shoulder. Thomas bit down on that hand, hard, felt fingers crunch between his teeth. Hayes shrieked. Thomas bucked him off, scrambled to his feet, grabbed the machete he'd dropped during the tackle. Hayes pulled the knife from his shoulder with his ruined hand, blood pumping. He lunged at Thomas with it. Thomas swung the machete. The blade caught Hayes in the side of the neck. Not clean, Thomas lacked experience, but deep enough. The trader stumbled, dropped the knife, clutched at the wound. Blood poured between his fingers, arterial, fatal. "My wife's name was Benny," Thomas said, voice shaking with fury and grief. "My son never got a name because you and your kind murdered them. You separate families, sell children, destroy lives. Tonight you pay for every single one." He swung again. This time the machete took Hayes's head clean off. Thomas stood there, breathing hard, covered in blood, crying and laughing simultaneously. Grief and vengeance mixing into something beyond emotion. 6 down. Mama Ruth had the trickiest assignment. Luther Pierce never left his cabin at night except for the outhouse, and even then he carried a rifle. He was the most paranoid, most dangerous of all the overseers. But Ruth was 67 years old, frail and non-threatening. When she knocked on his door at 11:30 p.m. with a bottle of special whiskey as a gift from Master Blackwood for excellent service, Luther had been suspicious but curious. "Master Blackwood sent you?" "Yes, sir, Mr. Pierce. Said you've been doing real good work. Wanted to show appreciation." Luther had taken the bottle, sniffed it. Seemed genuine. Good whiskey, too. Ruth had stolen one of Master's actual bottles and added the poison to maintain authenticity. "I'll save it for a special occasion," Luther said, starting to close the door. "Oh, Mr. Pierce, sir." Master said to drink it tonight. Said he wants to toast with you tomorrow about some new overseers he's hiring. Wants to make sure you approve of the quality." Luther hesitated, then shrugged. "All right, 1 glass." He poured, drank. Ruth waited outside, counting seconds. At 90 seconds, Luther started feeling strange. At 2 minutes, he couldn't stand. At 3 minutes, he was convulsing on the floor. Ruth entered the cabin, watched him die, felt no satisfaction, no anger, just exhaustion. She didn't take his head, didn't have the strength, but she'd completed her mission. 7 down. At 12:33 a.m., 6 people converged at the whipping post in the center of the plantation. The same post where hundreds of slaves had been tortured over the years. The same post where Abeni's husband, Thomas, had been struck across the face the day she died. Tonight, it would become a monument. Isaiah arrived first, carrying Jacob Thornton's head. Martha came second, with Marcus Doyle's, then Thomas with Robert Hayes's, then Josiah with William Cobb's, then Samuel with a cloth sack. He'd gone back and taken Pritchard's head after all, then Moses with Thomas Whitaker's. Mama Ruth arrived empty-handed but reported, "Luther Pierce is dead in his cabin. 6 heads, 1 still attached to a body." Isaiah sent 2 men to retrieve it. They returned 10 minutes later with Luther Pierce's head. 7 heads, 7 overseers, all dead within 90 minutes. Isaiah placed Thornton's head on top of the whipping post. The others arranged the remaining 6 heads in a circle at the base, facing outward, a message that would be visible from every angle. In the lamplight, the scene was medieval, biblical. 7 men who'd tortured hundreds now reduced to trophies, eyes open, mouths frozen in various expressions of shock and terror. Moses stepped back, looking at their work. "Sweet Jesus." "Jesus had nothing to do with this," Isaiah said quietly. "This was human justice, our justice." He raised Zara's justice above his head. Blood still dripped from the blade. "Now we wake the plantation. Now we free our people. Now we burn it all down." The 40 conspirators who'd participated in various ways began fanning out across the slave quarters, waking people cabin by cabin. "Get up, we're leaving, we're free. Get up now." Confusion at first, then realization, then joy mixed with terror. The overseers, dead, all 7, come see. By 10:00 a.m., 200 people stood in the common area, staring at the heads mounted on the whipping post. Some cried, some laughed, some stood in shocked silence. Isaiah climbed onto a platform near the post, raised his voice to carry, "My name is Isaiah Johnson. You know me. Some don't. Don't matter. What matters is this. Tonight, we killed 7 devils. Tomorrow, we walk free. Any who want to stay, stay. But slavery is over for us. We're going to the Great Dismal Swamp, where we'll build our own town. Freedom land. No masters, no chains, no whips. Just us, living as humans deserve. Silence. Then one voice. They'll come after us. The militia. The army. They'll hunt us down." Isaiah nodded. "Maybe. Probably. But we'll be in the swamp where they can't follow. And we'll fight. And we'll survive. Because living one day free is worth more than a lifetime in chains." Moses stepped forward. "Anyone who stays behind, we understand. No judgment. But anyone who comes, you follow Isaiah's leadership. We move together, we survive together. We're free together." A woman in the back shouted, "What about Master Blackwood?" Isaiah turned toward the big house, 100 yards away. Lamplight showed in the windows. The master was awake. Probably heard the commotion. "He dies tonight, too. House burns, everything burns. We leave nothing but ashes." Josiah raised his hand. "I got kerosene from the coach house. Enough to burn it all." Isaiah nodded. "Do it. And someone bring Master Blackwood out here. He needs to see what his slaves built before he dies." 20 volunteers rushed toward the big house. Master Cornelius Blackwood was 58 years old, wealthy beyond measure, and utterly unprepared for revolution. He stood in his study, rifle in hand, watching through the window as his entire workforce gathered around the whipping post. When he saw the heads, his blood turned cold. "Margaret!" he screamed for his wife. "Margaret, get the children. We're leaving. Now." But Margaret Blackwood stood frozen in the parlor. staring out her own window at 200 former slaves marching toward the house. Cornelius, they're coming. I can see that. Get to the root cellar. Hide. But it was too late. The doors burst open. 20 men poured inside. Cornelius fired his rifle. The bullet caught one man in the shoulder. The man went down, screaming, but the others didn't stop, didn't even slow. They swarmed Cornelius, ripped the rifle from his hands, dragged him outside. Margaret screamed. The 3 Blackwood children, ages 8, 11, and 14, huddled together crying. Isaiah stood in the plantation yard, waiting. When they brought Cornelius before him, the master's face was pure terror. Isaiah? Isaiah, what is this? What have you done? What you made necessary, Master Blackwood. I treated you well. I gave you work, shelter, food. You gave me chains. You worked my daughter to death. You allowed your overseers to rape, torture, and murder my people for profit. You're not a benefactor. You're a demon. And demons burn. Cornelius tried to pull rank even now. You'll hang for this. All of you. The governor will send troops. You can't. Isaiah hit him, not with a weapon, just his fist. Cornelius collapsed, nose broken, blood streaming. Bring his family out, Isaiah ordered. No, Cornelius screamed. Please, not them. They did nothing. Kill me, but spare them. Isaiah's voice was ice. Like you spared families when you sold children? Like you spared my daughter when your overseer worked her to death? Margaret and the 3 children were brought out. The children sobbed. Margaret held them, trying to shield them with her body. Isaiah looked at them, really looked, saw their terror, their humanity, and felt his rage falter. These children hadn't chosen this life, hadn't chosen to be born into wealth built on suffering. They were just children. Moses approached quietly. Isaiah, what do we do? Isaiah stood silent for a long moment. Every fiber of his being wanted vengeance, wanted to make Cornelius watch his family die like Isaiah had watched Abeni die. But he wasn't Cornelius Blackwood, wasn't a monster, wasn't evil. He was just a man who'd been pushed too far. Let them go, Isaiah said finally. Take them to the road. Point them toward Natchez. They walk, alive. But Isaiah, Thomas protested, after what they did, we killed 7 overseers. We're killing the master. We're burning everything he built. That's enough. We're not murderers. We're liberators. And liberators don't kill children. Some grumbled, but most understood. This was the line between justice and genocide. Margaret and her children were released. They ran toward the road, sobbing, not looking back. Cornelius watched them go, then turned to Isaiah. Thank you. Thank you for... Don't. Isaiah's voice cut like steel. I didn't spare them for you. I spared them for me, so I can sleep at night knowing I'm better than you ever were. He nodded to Moses. Hang him. They dragged Cornelius Blackwood to the whipping post, looped rope around his neck, pulled him up. He kicked for 2 minutes, gurgling, eyes bulging, face turning purple. The 200 watched in silence. No cheering, no celebration, just witnessing the end of an era. When Cornelius finally stopped moving, Isaiah cut him down. They mounted his head alongside the 7 overseers, 8 heads, 8 symbols of oppression, 8 warnings to anyone who'd continue this evil. Josiah and his team doused the big house with kerosene. Every room, every floor, every piece of furniture that had been purchased with slave labor. At 2:17 a.m., Isaiah struck a match. For Abeni, for Benjamin, for every soul who died in chains. He tossed the match. The big house ignited like kindling. Flames roared up the walls, through the windows, consuming everything. Within minutes, the entire structure was an inferno. The heat could be felt 100 yards away. The cotton gin went next, then the overseer's barracks, then the smokehouse, the stables, the equipment sheds. Everything burned. By 3:00 a.m., Blackwood Plantation was a wasteland of fire and ash. 8 heads on a post, buildings destroyed. 200 people gathered with whatever possessions they could carry. Isaiah stood before them one last time. We leave now. We walk 30 miles to the Great Dismal Swamp. We walk through the night and all tomorrow. No stopping except for water and rest. Anyone too weak to walk we carry. Anyone who wants to turn back, go now. Last chance. No one moved. Then let's go home. To freedom. Moses started singing. Others joined. Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt land. Tell old Pharaoh, let my people go. 200 voices, strong, defiant, free. They marched into the darkness. Behind them, Blackwood Plantation burned. Ahead, the swamp waited, unknown, dangerous, but theirs. Isaiah carried Zara's justice on his shoulder. Behind him walked Thomas, Martha, Samuel, Ruth, Josiah, Moses, the 7 who'd killed 7. Warriors, heroes, legends. By dawn, they were 15 miles away. By noon, 25 miles. By sunset of March 16th, they reached the great dismal swamp and vanished into its depths. This story is brutal, it's violent, it's real. These people existed, these horrors happened. And when there's no law to protect, when there's no justice official, sometimes justice comes with blood. If this story touched something deep inside you, leave your like, share it. And remember, freedom was never given, it was always taken. Continue to discover what happened after. News of the Blackwood Massacre reached Natchez by noon on March 16th. Margaret Blackwood had stumbled into town at dawn, incoherent, 3 terrified children clinging to her, babbling about heads on posts and fire, and 200 slaves marching into the night. At first, no one believed her. Mass slave uprising? Impossible. There hadn't been one since Nat Turner in 1831, 27 years ago. The South had learned, had tightened control, had broken any spirit of rebellion. But when Sheriff Thomas Clayton rode out to Blackwood Plantation with 4 deputies, they found exactly what Margaret described. 8 heads mounted on the whipping post, flies already swarming, eyes open, mouths frozen in eternal screams. The entire plantation burned to foundations. Nothing left but smoking ruins and ash, and not a single slave in sight. 200 people vanished like smoke. Sheriff Clayton vomited twice, then rode back to Natchez faster than he'd ever ridden in his life. By 2:00 p.m., emergency bells rang throughout Adams County. By 3:00 p.m., messengers rode to surrounding counties. By 4:00 p.m., telegraph lines crackled with news spreading across Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama. By nightfall, the entire South knew. Panic was immediate and absolute. Colonel Richard Beauregard, commander of the Adams County Militia, called emergency assembly. 250 men responded within 3 hours, armed, mounted, ready. Gentlemen, Beauregard addressed them from the courthouse steps. What happened at Blackwood Plantation is an act of war, not just against one man, but against our entire way of life. 8 white men murdered in cold blood, 200 slaves armed and dangerous. If we don't respond with overwhelming force, every plantation in the South will face the same fate. Judge Pemberton stood beside him. The state legislature has authorized martial law in Adams County. Anyone found harboring fugitive slaves will be executed. Anyone found sympathizing with this rebellion will be executed. We will show no mercy because they showed none. Reverend Caldwell, the one who'd expressed hesitation weeks earlier, now stood silent. Fear had replaced whatever moral doubt he'd felt. The militia organized into 3 divisions. Alpha Division, 100 men to track the fugitives with bloodhounds. Bravo Division, 80 men to guard remaining plantations against copycat attacks. Charlie Division, 70 men to interrogate every slave within 50 miles for information. Professional slave catchers were hired. $50 per captured slave, $100 for leaders, $500 for Isaiah Johnson specifically. Wanted posters went up in every town. $500 reward, dead or alive, Isaiah Johnson, Negro male, age 38, 6 feet 2 inches, 230 lbs blacksmith, born in Angola, extremely dangerous, wanted for murder of 8 white men and leading slave. Insurrection at Blackwood Plantation, last seen March 16, 1858, believed heading north. Caution. Subject is armed, intelligent, and ruthless, as killed with axes, machetes, and bare hands, will kill again without hesitation. Contact Sheriff Thomas Clayton, Natchez, Mississippi. But there was one problem. Alpha Division couldn't track the fugitives. The bloodhounds, brought in from neighboring counties since William Cobb's were poisoned, followed the trail for 15 miles, then lost it completely at the edge of the great dismal swamp. The swamp was 30,000 acres of hell, stagnant water, quicksand, alligators, snakes, mosquitoes thick enough to suffocate, trees so dense that sunlight barely penetrated, air so humid you could drown breathing it, White men didn't enter the great dismal swamp. Those who did rarely came back out. Captain Marcus Steele led Alpha Division to the swamp edge on March 18th, stared into the darkness, heard sounds, animals, fugitives, impossible to tell. "We going in, sir?" his lieutenant asked. Steele considered. He had 100 men, all armed, all trained, but none experienced in swamp warfare. Send in a scout team, 5 men. Map the first 2 miles, report back by sunset. 5 volunteers entered, none returned. At sunset, the remaining 95 heard screaming from deep in the swamp. Brief, desperate, then silence. They found one body the next morning floating in stagnant water near the entrance, throat slit, eyes gouged out. A message carved into his chest with a knife. Turned back, Steele withdrew. Reported to Colonel Beauregard that pursuit into the swamp was suicide. "Then we starve them out," Beauregard decided. "Post guards at every exit point. Block all supply routes. They'll have to emerge eventually." But the great dismal swamp had 47 possible exit points across 3 counties. The militia didn't have enough men to guard all of them, and Isaiah knew this. Inside the swamp, the 200 fugitives faced their own challenges. The first 3 days were hell. No trails, no dry ground, wading through waist-deep water, fighting leeches, avoiding alligators. 7 people died in those first 3 days. 2 from snakebite, 3 from exhaustion, 1 drowned. 1 simply gave up, sat down in the water, and stopped moving. But Isaiah kept them together, kept them moving, kept them alive. On day 4, they found them, maroons. The great dismal swamp had been home to escaped slaves for over 100 years, communities of fugitives who'd built lives in the wilderness, trading secretly with sympathetic locals, growing food in hidden clearings, surviving where the white world couldn't reach. The largest community was led by a man named Freedom, real name long forgotten. He was 63 years old, born free in Philadelphia, moved to Virginia, kidnapped and enslaved at age 20, escaped at 22, and had lived in the swamp for 41 years. When Isaiah's 200 emerged into Freedom's clearing, exhausted, starving, desperate, the maroons could have turned them away. More people meant more risk of discovery. Instead, Freedom offered his hand. "Welcome home, brother." Isaiah shook it. "We need sanctuary, need help. We got nothing to trade except our labor and our loyalty." Freedom smiled. "Your labor's welcome, your loyalty's required. But most important," he gestured at the 200, "you got courage. You did what most only dream. Killed your masters, walked away. That's worth more than gold here." The maroons fed them, showed them where to build shelters, taught them how to navigate the swamp, how to find drinkable water, which plants were edible, which snakes were deadly, how to hide from patrols. Over the following weeks, Isaiah's group integrated with Freedom's community. They called it Freedom Land, but the maroons called it Hope. Combined population, 347 people. Men, women, children, all formerly enslaved, all free now. Isaiah became Hope's military leader. His experience, his planning ability, his ruthlessness, all vital for defense. They organized security, perimeter guards at all 12 entrances, scouts monitoring militia movements, weapons training for everyone, over age 14 escape routes, planned if they were ever discovered. Moses became spiritual leader. His sermons, delivered every Sunday, kept morale high. Ruth became chief healer. Her knowledge of medicine saved dozens of lives. Josiah became chief scout. His knowledge of roads and towns made trade possible. Martha trained the women in combat. "We're warriors now. We protect ourselves." Thomas worked the hidden fields. The maroons had been growing corn, beans, squash in secret clearings for decades. Thomas expanded them. Samuel, despite his age, worked as elder advisor. His wisdom earned respect. Meanwhile, Mississippi descended into paranoia. Between March 16th and June 1st, 1858, 12 more plantations experienced resistance. March 22nd, 5 slaves at Riverside Plantation poisoned their overseer. April 3rd, 10 slaves at Magnolia Plantation burned the cotton gin. April 18th, 3 slaves at Oakwood Plantation killed 2 overseers and escaped. May 2nd, 15 slaves at Thornwood Plantation went on strike. refusing to work until conditions improved. Every incident cited Isaiah Johnson's name. Every arrested slave mentioned Blackwood. The legend was spreading. Plantation owners responded with increased brutality. Public whippings tripled. Punishments became more severe. Some owners sold their entire slave populations and moved north, too terrified to continue. But the violence only created more resistance, more escapes, more attacks. By summer 1858, Mississippi had a full-blown crisis. The governor requested federal troops. President James Buchanan, sympathetic to Southern interests, sent 500 soldiers. But soldiers couldn't enter the Great Dismal Swamp any more effectively than militia could. The swamp protected its own. Years passed. 1858 became 1859. 1859 became 1860. 1850, the population reached 500. They'd built a functioning town, cabins, a meeting hall, a school, illegal, but who would stop them? Fields, smokehouse, even a small chapel where Moses preached. Isaiah married again, a woman named Sarah who'd escaped Virginia 3 years earlier. They had a daughter. He named her Abini in memory. For the first time since being kidnapped at age 12, Isaiah lived free, really free. No master, no chains, no whips. He was 41 years old, building a life, raising a daughter, leading a community. But he never forgot Blackwood Plantation, never forgot the 7 heads, never forgot why he was here, and he knew it wasn't over. November 1860, Abraham Lincoln elected president. December 1860, South Carolina secedes. January 1861, Mississippi secedes. By April 1861, the Civil War began. Fort Sumter fell. The Union called for volunteers. The Confederacy mobilized, and in the Great Dismal Swamp, 500 formerly enslaved people faced a choice. Moses called assembly. Brothers and sisters, the white men are fighting each other now. North against South. This is our chance. We can stay hidden here forever, or we can fight for our freedom alongside the Union. Arguments erupted. Stay safe. Join the fight. Risk everything. Change everything. Isaiah stood. I killed 7 overseers, freed 200 people, built this town. I've lived free for 3 years, but my freedom isn't complete until every chain in America is broken, every plantation burned, every master deposed. I'm joining the Union Army. Anyone who wants to come, come. Anyone who wants to stay, stay. No judgment. 73 men volunteered, ages 18 to 55. Most had never fired a gun, but all had reasons to fight. They left Hope in May 1861, walked to Memphis, presented themselves to Union recruiters. At first, the Union Army rejected them. We don't arm Negroes. This is a white man's war. But desperation changed policy. By 1863, the Union was forming colored troops regiments. Isaiah and his 73 were accepted into the 3rd United States Colored Infantry Regiment. They trained at Camp William Penn in Pennsylvania. Isaiah, at 44, was older than most recruits but more disciplined, more focused, more deadly. His combat record, Battle of Milliken's Bend, June 1863, killed 4 Confederate soldiers in hand-to-hand combat. Siege of Vicksburg, July 1863, led a night raid that destroyed Confederate supply depot. Battle of Nashville, December 1864. His unit broke Confederate lines, capturing 200 prisoners. Isaiah became Sergeant Isaiah Johnson, then Lieutenant Johnson, then Captain Johnson. The boy stolen from Angola at age 12, the slave who'd forged chains for 26 years, the father who'd lost his daughter, the rebel who'd beheaded 7 overseers. Now a decorated Union officer fighting to end slavery forever. The war ended April 9, 1865. Lee surrendered at Appomattox. The Confederacy collapsed. December 6, 1865, the 13th Amendment ratified, slavery abolished throughout the United States. Captain Isaiah Johnson, age 47, stood at the signing ceremony in Washington, D.C., one of only 50 black soldiers invited. He thought of Abini, of his unnamed grandson, of the 200 who'd walked free with him, of the 7 heads on the whipping post. He wept, not from sadness, from victory. Isaiah returned to Hope in 1866, found it thriving. Population now 680, no longer hidden, no longer illegal, just free. He lived there for the next 21 years, became elder statesman, advised on Reconstruction policy, testified before Congress about slavery's horrors, traveled the North giving speeches. His story spread, not the sanitized version, the real version. 7 decapitated overseers, 8 heads on a post, 200 people marching to freedom. Some called him hero, some called him monster. Isaiah didn't care. He knew what he was, a man who'd done what was necessary. Isaiah Johnson died peacefully in his sleep on March 15, 1887. Exactly 29 years after the Blackwood Massacre. He was 67 years old, surrounded by family, his wife Sarah, his daughter Abini. Age 26, 5 grandchildren, and 42 great-grandchildren from his extended community. His funeral drew 2,000 people, black and white, former slaves, Union veterans, abolitionists, historians. Moses, now 75 and half blind, delivered the eulogy. Isaiah Johnson was not a perfect man. He killed, he destroyed, he brought blood and fire, but he did so in a world where blood and fire were the only languages oppressors understood. He lived 67 years, 26 as a slave, 3 as a fugitive, 4 as a soldier, and 34 as a free man. He died having seen slavery end, having helped end it. That is victory. That is justice. Rest now, warrior. Your work is complete. They buried him next to his first daughter Abeni's grave, which they'd relocated from Blackwood Plantation years earlier. Her headstone read, Abeni Johnson, 1838 to 1857, beloved daughter. Her death sparked a revolution. His headstone read, Isaiah Johnson, 1820 to 1887, blacksmith, father, warrior, freeman. He broke his own chains, then broke the chains of hundreds. For 150 years, Isaiah's story was suppressed. Not taught in schools, not included in history books. Too violent, too uncomfortable, too revolutionary. But oral tradition preserved it. In black communities across the South, grandparents told grandchildren about the blacksmith who beheaded 7 overseers, about the 200 who walked to freedom, about freedom land in the swamp. Details changed over generations. Some versions said he killed 10 overseers, some said 20, some said 100. The numbers didn't matter. The core truth remained: one man decided enough was enough. One man refused to accept slavery. One man fought back and changed everything. Historical records confirm the basics. Blackwood Plantation burned March 16, 1850. 8 white men killed, decapitated 200 slaves, disappeared. Isaiah Johnson's name appears in militia records, wanted posters, and later in Union Army service records. The Great Dismal Swamp housed maroon communities for over 100 years. Many former Blackwood slaves fought in the Civil War. Isaiah's impact extended far beyond his lifetime. Immediate impact: 1858 to 1861. 47 documented plantation attacks in Mississippi inspired by Blackwood. Estimated 2,000 slaves escaped to swamps and North, citing Isaiah's example. Increased abolitionist momentum in North. See what slavery drives people to. Paranoia in South weakened plantation system before the war even started. Civil War impact: 1861 to 1865. 73 Hope residents joined Union Army. Stories of Blackwood Massacre used in recruitment. Remember, Isaiah became unofficial motto of 3rd USCT Regiment. Confederate soldiers feared black troops specifically because of stories like Isaiah's Reconstruction. Impact: 1865 to 1877. Isaiah testified before Congress about slavery's brutality. His testimony influenced 14th Amendment language. His story was used in Freedmen's Bureau education programs. Hope became model for sustainable black communities. Long-term impact. Inspired Harriet Tubman. They met in 1863, influenced Frederick Douglass's later writings, referenced in early civil rights movement speeches, rediscovered by Black Power movement in 1960s. Today, Blackwood Plantation is a historical site, not celebrated, confronted. A memorial stands where the big house burned. On this ground, 200 human beings were enslaved. On March 16, 1858, they freed themselves. We honor their courage. We acknowledge the violence required. We remember why it was necessary. 8 posts stand where the whipping post stood. Each bears a name: Jacob Thornton, Marcus Doyle, Samuel Pritchard, William Cobb, Thomas Whitaker, Robert Hayes, Luther Pierce, Cornelius Blackwood, not to celebrate their deaths, to remember that oppression has consequences, that systems of brutality eventually breed resistance, that you can only push humans so far before they push back. What can we learn from Isaiah Johnson's story? About oppression, every oppressive system contains the seeds of its own destruction. The more brutal the oppression, the more violent the resistance. Slavery wasn't ended by patience and prayer alone. It required blood, fire, and people like Isaiah willing to kill for freedom. About resistance, even the powerless have power if they're willing to use it. Isaiah was one enslaved blacksmith, but he had intelligence, patience, and nothing left to lose. That combination is more dangerous than any army. About justice, when official justice fails, humans create their own. Isaiah couldn't sue Jacob Thornton for murdering his daughter, couldn't appeal to courts that didn't recognize him as human, couldn't vote out legislators who wrote slave codes. So he created justice with an axe. Was it right? Was it wrong? History judges based on who wins. About cost, freedom has a price. Isaiah paid with his daughter's life, his first 26 years, his peace of mind. The 200 paid with everything they knew. 7 overseers paid with their lives. Thousands of soldiers paid in the Civil War. The 13th Amendment was purchased with 750,000 deaths. Freedom is never free. About memory, those who control history control the present. Isaiah's story was suppressed because it threatened the narrative of peaceful progress, of slavery ending through moral persuasion alone. But suppressed stories always resurface. Truth survives. And today, we remember Isaiah not despite his violence, but because of what his violence represented, the absolute refusal to accept injustice. The legacy continues. Isaiah's great-great-great-grandchildren live today, some in Mississippi, some spread across America, some don't even know their ancestors' story, but the story persists in oral tradition, in historical records, in the very ground where Blackwood Plantation burned. In 2020, during protests after George Floyd's murder, someone spray-painted on the Blackwood Memorial, "Remember Isaiah, when justice fails, we make our own." The paint was removed, but the message remains. Isaiah's spirit, that refusal to accept oppression, that willingness to fight back, that insistence on freedom at any cost, lives on. Some call him hero, some call him terrorist, some call him freedom fighter, some call him murderer. Isaiah Johnson was all of these, and none. He was simply a man pushed past endurance, who chose violence over submission, who prioritized freedom over survival, who became legend by refusing to remain victim. 7 overseers died that night, but the system that created them died too, not immediately, not even quickly. But Isaiah lit a fire that burned for 7 years, until it consumed the entire institution of slavery. 1 blacksmith, 7 deaths, 200 freed, and a nation changed forever. This is Isaiah Johnson's story, not sanitized, not comfortable, not easy, but true and necessary. Because remembering our history, all of it, even the parts soaked in blood, is how we prevent repeating it, is how we honor those who fought, is how we understand the cost of the freedoms we take for granted. Isaiah Johnson died free. After 26 years enslaved, he lived 34 years free, raised children free, voted free, owned land free, died in his own bed free. That was his victory. That was his justice. That was his legacy. Rest in power, Isaiah Johnson. Blacksmith, warrior, liberator. Your work is done. Your story lives forever. This story was brutal. It was violent. It was necessary. These events really happened. These people existed. This blood was spilled on American soil. If this story moved you, if it challenged you, if it made you think about the real cost of freedom, leave your like. Share this story. Make sure it's never forgotten again. In the comments, tell me, was Isaiah's revenge justified? Would you have done the same? What other stories of slave resistance should be told? Remember, knowing our history, even the darkest parts, is essential for building a more just future. Freedom was never given, it was always taken, with blood, sweat, tears, and sometimes with an axe. This is the story of Isaiah the Decapitator Johnson, one of thousands, never forgotten, always remembered.